Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We're very glad to have you for the second webinar of a series that we launched a few months ago around mining and GeoAI. Before we start, I'd like to thank Dan from Picterra, who basically organized everything and make this webinar happen. And of course, we're very glad to have you again for this webinar to bring your expertise on artisanal small scale mining. Before we dive in the topic, start with a bit of housekeeping and logistics. The way we've designed this session is mainly to be interactive, so there will be plenty of time and room to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So make sure to send your question on the chat to Picterra team, and we'll try to answer all of them at the end of the session. Ken, I leave you the floor. Maybe you can start with introducing yourself.
Thanks very much, Pierrick, and hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ken Davis, and I work with the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, Chemicals and Health Branch. And I work on projects and programs that help countries implement multilateral environmental agreements. And I do a lot of work on the Minamata Convention on Mercury, and in particular on the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector, which of course is our topic of our webinar, and which is also the largest source of mercury pollution. I'm also interested in how data, including remote sensing data, can be used to help interventions on artisanal and small-scale gold mining, help develop policy, and help make the lives of miners and the environment better. And so I think this is a great example of the kind of collaborations that we can do to work in this very interesting sector.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Pierrick.
On my side, I will say I will be very brief. So I am Pierrick, I'm the CEO and one of the co-founder of Picterra. We're a Swiss-based company that we launched back in 2016. Long story short, what we do, we're developing a software platform enabling our customers to train, deploy, and manage Earth observation algorithms that are eventually used to automatically analyze satellite and drone aerial imagery at scale. Maybe a disclaimer before we start, we're not a consulting company, so it's not us developing algorithm, but we have created a product that I believe is still unique on the market, and enabling our customers to train themselves algorithm and models.
Great. So Pierrick, then if you're ready, I can go on to start us off with a brief introduction on artisanal small-scale mining. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there are. I know there are several participants on this webinar who are already very familiar with this sector. So apologize, of course, for the repetition. But perhaps there's also folks who are, doing remote sensing or other types of analyses, but are not so familiar with ASM. So I want to just give a brief introduction and talk about why I think there's some pretty interesting applications for remote sensing and machine learning. So ASM is artisanal and small-scale mining, and I'll also use the acronym ASGM, which is artisanal and small-scale gold mining. So apologize in advance for those acronyms. But ASM, it's a low technology, labor-intensive sector. It provides a critical source of income for millions of people around the world, and it produces a large proportion of the world's minerals, from sand and gravel to gemstone to tin, tungsten to gold, of course, which we'll talk about today. The best estimates, I think, currently are about 45 million people around the world working in artisanal and small-scale mining. This dwarfs the size of the large-scale mining workforce. So in terms of the number of people involved, it's a very large sector. ASM is taking place around the world, primarily, but certainly not exclusively, in developing countries. ASM is frequently part of the informal economy, meaning that the participants often lack some of the necessary permits, permissions, mining rights, or land tenure, or revenue payment that would characterize the formal economy. And we do take care to distinguish informal mining from illegal mining. Illegal mining being mining that's taking place in protected areas, in indigenous areas, in association with criminal groups or organized crime. We know that this happens, but in our work, the large majority of miners might be informal, but it wouldn't be considered illegal. And so we definitely differentiate between those groups. ASM is a critical source of income, as I mentioned, especially in a lot of places where there aren't a lot of other options, and in rural areas where there are a few other opportunities. There are also some serious environmental, social, and health issues that we'll see here in this webinar, and these certainly need to be addressed. So artisanal small-scale gold mining, this is one type of ASM, but it's an important one. First of all, it's producing about 20% of the world's gold. So in terms of gold supply, artisanal and small-scale gold mining is very significant. It's taking place in more than 80 countries in the world, and there are about 15 to 20 million miners in this sector. Although, of course, it's very hard to get good estimates. There might be many more. The connection with mercury, and I mentioned that I work with assisting implementation of the Minamata Convention on Mercury, is that artisanal miners use mercury to amalgamate, to form an amalgam with gold that's found in ores or concentrate or sediment. An amalgam is a mixture of metals. So it sort of sucks up the gold. Then that amalgam can be heated, vaporized, the mercury evaporates, and you're left with the gold. That mercury is released into the atmosphere, and there's a host of environmental and health negative impacts that come from that. So UNEP is very active in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector. We're helping countries take steps to reduce and, where feasible, eliminate mercury, which is the obligation that those countries who are members of the Minamata Convention have. We do this through promoting non-mercury mining technologies and through facilitating formalization, entry into the formal economy, which then enables mining groups to access finance, to access supply chains for those consumers that want to buy responsibly mined gold. We have a flagship program for our capacity building efforts. It's called Planet Gold. That's funded by the Global Environment Facility and run by Planet Gold with other partners. I'll put the link in the chat so you can check that out. And finally, before we get going into the good stuff here, I just want to talk about the connection with artisanal mining and remote sensing. The types of impacts from ASM are frequently visible from space. Things like deforestation, land degradation, the types of activities that you can see on the screen here with a pit and a dredge, river turbidity, construction of equipment. These are visible from space. They're also almost by definition not well recorded because this is an informal activity. So we don't know where and what type always this activity is. ASM often takes place in remote areas where it's difficult to access and take a look at things on the ground. And so for all these reasons, remote sensing is a useful, powerful tool in learning about and characterizing, monitoring ASM activity. So just a note that what we won't be looking at in this webinar is using ASM for law enforcement. So, I mean, this is an application, but as I talked before about the difference between illegal mining and informal mining, we're focused more on ways that we can be facilitative and help miners move to better practices without engaging in criminalization, which in many cases can be counterproductive. This isn't to say that the problem of illegal mining doesn't occur, but it's not something that we're going to be taking a look at here. So I guess I'll get right into the first of the examples. So what we're going to show here is a couple of examples of ASM activities on the ground, and then Pierrick is going to show some of the what his team has done with Picterra in terms of detecting some of these features. So we're going to start out with an example in Indonesia. And the example is from the Kayahan River, which is in central Kalimantan, Indonesia. And I noticed actually that Daniel Stapper, I saw your name on there, and I think you actually did your PhD thesis on this region. So so feel free in the chat or in the comments to correct anything I said, since you obviously are the expert here. But the Kayahan River, this is a large tropical meandering river system in Indonesia. There's widespread artisanal small-scale gold mining taking place in the floodplain and on the river itself with dredges. One common thing that is observed here is a technique using floating dredges which have sluices connected to them, and that's what you can see on the left-hand slide with the guy in the red shorts. These are dredges that have a pump that pump up sediment from the river bottom, which will contain some gold. That sediment is then pumped onto the sluice, which will concentrate the heavy materials. In some cases, there might be mercury applied to a copper plate on this sluice. It might also be applied to the concentrate after the sluicing, but in any case, there are considerable amounts of mercury that are used here and that can find their way into the river in this process. So it's important to understand what's going on here in order to measure things like how many sluices there are, how the activity might change over time. With this information, we can do other analyses like estimate the amount of mercury used or the number of miners involved. But it's a large area. It's difficult to access and always get a good picture of on the ground. So I think it's a good use case for doing some remote sensing applications. So I guess I will now turn it back over to you, Pierrick, and you'll show us what your team has done here.
Absolutely. So let me just start with the end of the process. So basically what you're seeing here is what we call the detection, or that might also be called predictions. Before I explain you how we build this model and this detector, I just want to remind you that there is, no way that Picterra is an expert in mining or SM, but we are expert in what we call MLOps. And just to say a few words on what is machine learning ops, MLOps, is basically the process to make the production and the deployment of machine learning algorithm frictionless. So we're good at that. Just maybe if we start by looking at, so again, that's the output, that's the end of the process. This is basically what you can get out of the Picterra platform. The algorithm has detected more than 225 sluices, and just that's interesting to see how they look like from above. Here we're looking at a 30 centimeter spatial resolution imagery. So this is basically what sluices, or more precisely clusters of sluices looks like from above. Also the area that you see, so the full picture is covering 145 square kilometers. So it's pretty large area. And that's also why using remote sensing and artificial intelligence makes sense. Now I'm going to show you how we build this model. Just another word on that, because Ken, you asked me about, okay, what are the challenges when it comes to detecting like this type of object in machine learning? And I think that's really inherent to the nature of the object, meaning that you know or not, sorry if I not teaching you anything here, but when it comes to machine learning, at the end, it's mostly about the training data that you use to train your model. Here we're talking about a deep learning convolutional network that has to be trained. Basically, a model has to see some example of objects before being able to detect those objects. And just to say here that sluices are not, you won't find ready-to-use training data set for sluices, because as you said, Ken, before, this practice is not very well recorded. That will be the most challenging part, is how can you come with a good training data set that will be ultimately define the performance of your model. So now, if I go one step back, so when you want to train a new detector, you will be able to choose between the detection type you want to achieve, either count or segmentation. Here, obviously, we want to count object, while segmenting will be more appropriate to identify patterns or area surface. So the detector that you're gonna see is obviously in counting mode. So the first thing that you need to train a detector is obviously an image. For this webinar, we only use one image to train the detector. I will show you later on an example with several training images. Just saying that, again, when it comes to machine learning, diversity is king or queen. So also bringing as much as you can diversity in your images, in your training data set, will also define the performance of your model. So we use basically only one image. What you can do in theory is to add more image. So I will be fast on this one. So you can add, of course, image from your own file. You can import image from URL. So here's or you can also import image from a WMS, from an imagery server. So once you have your image, then start the training of the model. It all starts with what we call the training areas. So the yellow areas that you see here. And inside these training areas, you will basically feed your model with some example of the object that you need to detect. So I've drawn some training areas. Then we can use this annotation tool that we have. And the idea is basically to draw polygons around object of interest, something like that. And of course, you can copy paste, do things and so on to make the annotation faster. Again, I was talking about diversity. This is absolutely key. Diversity, of course, to have as more representative object as you can, but also diversity in the background, in the foreground, etc. What is important as well, so here you have your training areas, and then you have the testing areas, but I will get back on this later, and the accuracy area. At the end, machine learning is about diversity and balance. So the architecture of the model itself, of course, it's important, but it matters a bit less than the training strategy that you're going to put in place for the model to really pick the object that you want. So if we have done like 11 training areas on the image, what you will notice as well is that you have empty training areas. It's really fundamental for the model to understand what not to detect. So that's why basically the concept is pretty easy to grasp, is to give like counterexample to the model of things or object that it should not be detecting. I would say, just to give you some reference and some context, took me approximately 10 minutes to draw those training areas plus to annotate. That's relatively short. So at the end, we have 52 outlines, so 52 training data. And those training data have been used to train the model itself. So that will be basically the first part. And then in Picterra, that's more like it's both like a philosophical and a scientific approach. We don't believe in very large model being trained on a lot of training data, but we do believe in short iteration. So that's why we have this. You have these red areas that are the testing area, basically, that will allow you to quickly assess the performance of the model from a visual point of view. So basically, is the model picking up the right thing? And here we can see that, the model has picked up the right thing. So you can navigate through your testing areas just to make sure that the model is really picking what you want. That's the case, and so on and so on. Then the last steps, I would say, is to be able to evaluate the performance of the model. So that's what we call the accuracy. Here, the accuracy is 100%, but we probably get back on this machine learning metrics later on. So basically, within the blue area, that are the accuracy area, you're going to annotate, again, the object of interest here. And this will be your kind of your ground truth data. And this is against this data or this accuracy data that the performance of the model will be assessed. So they are not used to train the model, but they're really there to compute the accuracy of the model. And again, so what I was saying before is that at the end, it's all about diversity and the balance between training areas, testing area, and accuracy area. Because what you don't want is that the model kind of learn by heart what to detect. Otherwise, there is no need to use machine learning or deep learning. You can just visually draw a polygon around the object of interest. So you want to really teach the model to detect the right things. So a good balance between training area. We have some diversity here. We give some counterexample to the model, and then you're ready to go. You just need to click on train. Then what we have been heavily working on the last couple of years is to be able to provide information on the performance itself of the model. And or not, but what's happening within a deep learning model is kind of a black box. That's the beauty of deep learning model, is that the model is going to pick the best information for the model to learn. So what's happening between the different layers of a model is a bit of a black box. So the big challenge that we have, not only us, but in the ML industry, is to be able to objectivize the performance of the model. So why a model is returning 100% of accuracy, why a model is not detecting the right thing. So that's why we've created this little tool that you have here that gives you some insights on your detector. So we have two things. The first thing is the recommendation part. So the model will, or the platform will basically help you to improve the performance of the model, and it's going to tell you where you should add some training data, where you should draw some accuracy area, and things like that. So the starting point is a kind of a visual representation of the clustering of the pixel. So this is done automatically by the platform. And then so you have this marker. So in yellow, it means that this part of the image is lacking some training data, meaning that this type of pixel that we have here is underrepresented within your training data set. So that's a way to improve it. And then you can navigate through the recommendation. In blue, you have the accuracy area. If you really want to objectivize the performance of the model, it means that you should have some accuracy area in those zones. So that's the dataset recommendation report. That's a way to explore your training images and to understand where your model might be a bit weak based on this clustering approach that we have here. Then we have the training report, which is also quite interesting. So you have basically the main parameters of the model, the steps. Can come back on this afterward. The type of model that the platform is using. Basically, the model will pick up the best backbone model for your use case. Then we have a summary of the accuracy, the F-score, which is basically a combination of precision and recall. Pretty sure we're going to get back on this later. You have some stats on your data set. And there is something that I like a lot. So the confusion matrix, it's not really relevant because we only have one class. But what I like the most is probably this uncertainty maps that is basically telling you what the model is seeing. So that's the image, the uncertainty. So the brighter it is, the more uncertain the model is. So for instance, if you look at the uncertainty image, in the middle, you will see that the edge or the border of the object are pretty dark blue. So it means that the model really understand the right things. Then if you go to another example, you see that it's getting a bit yellowish on the left side of the object. So it means that the model start to be more uncertain on this type of object. So what you will do, basically, you will add more training data, really pertaining to this uncertainty analysis. And of course, you can go through all this image. And then this is basically what the model is seeing or what the model is not seeing. So once your detector is ready, then you go back in your project. Again, as I was saying in introduction, machine learning only makes sense if you have a certain volume of data to analyze. So the idea is, again, so you will add imagery here in your project, and you will assign a detector to your project. So the Sluices one is already there, and you will just click on detect on world project, and basically you're done. Can I leave you again the floor to go on the next use case?
Yeah, thanks, Pierrick. I'll do that. We'll move to the next use case, and I think it's already been noted that the participants can put any questions in the chat for the discussion at the end. And perhaps yeah, some of the artisanal and small-scale gold mining practitioners or experts might have particular questions about how applicable this is, or that sort of question. I think those would be interesting to have. But let's move on to the next of these kind of case studies that we're taking a look at. And the next one is in Western Kenya. It's in Kakamega County in Western Kenya, on a place called River Yala. And there's really nothing special about this site. In some ways, it's a very typical artisanal mining site. Of course, every artisanal mining site is special, but I think this is a good example too, because it shows that even on relatively small scale locations, small scale operations, there's still a lot of information that can be brought out by remote sensing. So in the River Yala, this is a agricultural area. It's rural area, but it has quite a high population density. So in fact, this part of Western Kenya has some of the highest rural population densities in the world. A lot of people living close together. On the banks of this part of the river, several years ago, artisanal miners started digging pits to do alluvial gold mining. In some cases, they were also removing sand and gravel for construction. I think probably this area has been worked on and off in the past, but it seems like the most recent phase started around 5 or 6 years ago. I was able to visit this site last year and took some of these pictures, so you can get a sense of what it looks like on the ground. There is an active community organization here that explained that they are working to reclaim the pits as they're not used when they're not used anymore, and they showed us several areas where the old mining pits had been reclaimed, and there could be agriculture restarted in these areas. So we can see some of that on the satellite imagery. In this particular area, by the way, we didn't observe mercury use. It's a fairly low impact type of artisanal and small scale mining, no mechanization. But there are impacts. It's a very important activity for this community, and as such, it's important to monitor and understand how this changes. And I think in the demo we can see some of the insights that we can get from looking at these remote sensing images over time and using some machine learning to detect the changes. So I'll turn it back over to you, Pierrick, to work through the demo again.
Yes, sure. So now, so before we kind of only look at a spatial analysis, now we're going to look at a spatial analysis plus a temporal analysis, which make even more sense when you think about all the new platform satellites that would be launched in the future. So my conviction is that we're going to move toward near real-time monitoring of this type of patterns. Okay, again, starting with the end. So that's the type of report that you can generate automatically with the platform. You can also, of course, extract or export the actual prediction. But as I was saying, the idea is to, sorry, not me, Ken was explaining that in this use case, it makes sense to have both like spatial and temporal analysis. So being able to monitor the evolution of a certain land use. And in our case, we're looking at pit, but also what was interesting when we dig a bit more into the use case, Ken was like, hey, but you know why? We can see from like 2017 to now that some of the land has been restored, so is now used for agricultural purpose. So that's also, I guess, meaningful information to extract from a time series. So that's the, as you can see, the evolution. And of course, you have the evolution of the surface cover either by mining or restored surface. So you can pick some dates and do some date comparison, or you can basically do some playback here. Ended up with this type of detectors. So again, remember what we did. So for this one, we selected segmentation mode, and we applied the same process. As I was saying before, these detectors have been trained on more than one image, which is, again, making more sense. And we have one class C, so 41 outlines. Now you notice that the annotation, so the training data, they're like super well matching the pits. Here you go. And I will take this occasion to show you this. I don't know if you heard about the segment anything model that was opened by Meta. And we're kind of, we're the first to integrate this model into the Picterra platform in order to speed up the annotation process, the labelization of data when it comes to irregular patterns like this. So by clicking on this magic wand icon, then you can use it. So I'm gonna try to show you basically how it works. It's basically, let's say that I want to pick up like those green areas, and this is how you're gonna basically annotate. And then you see, okay, the magic one has picked up a lot of stuff that I don't want. So I do a right click and put a black and remove what I'm not interested in until I get the right segmentation. So we use that like to create this training data set. So we're looking at those type of holes. Here we gave some counterexample, like empty training areas. Make sure to exclude the gooder things. Okay, so that's the webinar effect. So the labelization or the training data does not appear here, but they are. So you have to trust me. And then we test on a tested area. So again, the same concept with some recommendation. Can go through it quickly. So we have this again, this clustering automatically done, and the platform suggests that we should have more training area in that zone of the picture, which means that this type of pixel clustering is not representative enough in the training dataset. So that's basically how we train. The only difference that we use the segmentation mode. We use the magic wand to annotate faster and create a good training dataset that we tested on different images. Now, just to briefly show you, and so we have time for the question. If I go back in my project, or actually Ken project, we have a set of advanced tools, and this is how I generated this change detection report. Those are basically tools that we develop as soon as we have some requests. So you can do some change detection report. And for the occasion, we made a special one for what we call a restored surface. So the idea is to pick an image, basically after choose an image, and is okay, restored surface, result from another image. So I would recommend to do a clean numbering of your image. And again, mining. So basically, you will be able to compare what was mining and what was restored surface before and after, and where you want to basically show the output of this comparison. And then you click on run, and then you go, and you ended up with this type of report. Thank you. I think we're done with the demonstration, and I hope you get a feeling on how we could train high performance models. And now it's time for the question.
Yeah, so the questions should be in the chat now. I've got a few of them. I've got about 5 or 6.
Okay.
So the first question we have
Excellent.
is from Daniel Stapper. Thank you, Daniel. Daniel's asking what's the source of the imagery used in the sluice detection example of the 30 centimeter imagery. He's asking if it's freely available.
Okay, so that's an image coming from Google Earth. Just keep in mind that you cannot use Google Earth images when it comes to production, but for like demonstration purpose, that's okay. So that was coming from Google Earth image, and it's probably an Airbus image in the back, 30 centimeter. And the image might be available as archive imagery, but I'm not sure.
Okay, great, thank you. Ken, we have a question for you as well. The question is around, the question is, how do you balance the need for economic development in ASM communities with the imperative for environmental conservation?
Okay, thanks, Dan. Yeah, that's a good question, and a common one in ASM. I mean, well, really, there shouldn't there doesn't need to be that choice between economic development on the one hand and environmental conservation on the other hand. Of course, with current incentives and current government governance and policies, there often is that trade-off, and it is a reality. But in terms of mercury use, we have consistently shown that non-mercury technologies, mercury-free improved gravity concentration techniques, for example, can produce higher yields than mercury amalgamation. So the technology in terms of processing is there, and for eliminating mercury, it can be very feasible, but we need to put in place the enabling conditions, formalization, so that miners have permits and tenure, and so they can be confident that their investments can pay off over a long period of time. Professionalization, building business skills into mining groups. So those are the enabling conditions that we need to be able to introduce these mercury-free technologies. With that comes things like access to financing, access to markets, and with that there can be a win-win in terms of less environmental impact in terms of mercury use, and better income. Of course, all mining, it has environmental impacts, so including large-scale mining, by the way, which has certainly very significant environmental impacts as well. And there are some places where there's mining shouldn't be taking place, or the conditions should be very need to be restricted. But just as with large-scale mining, we do recognize that there are best practices in ASM that can mitigate impacts and allow mining to take place in a responsible way. So that's how I would answer that, I guess, in a general, in general. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. And a question from Agatha Laville. I think maybe this was answered during your demo, Pierrick, but the question is, could we train, see the results, annotate what's wrong, train, and then run again? So an iterative kind of process, learning step by step.
No, absolutely, that's a good question. The thing is that you can, for instance, like change a testing area into a training area or into a testing area. So that's basically how you speed up the training process, and that's also a way to do this quick and fast iteration. That's a bit of a hack, but it works.
Great, and a follow-up question from Daniel. So he's making the comment that it looks to work super well with that 30 centimeter imagery, but how does it work with anything on a lower resolution? If he's not mistaken, the best freely available imagery is from Sentinel at 10 meter resolution.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. maybe just the first part of the answer is to say that the platform itself, so the software is agnostic in terms of resolution and type of data that you can feed it with. Then I think the question that our customers are asking themselves before they start to train a detector is, do the resolution that I have matches the size of the object? We used to say that we need at least 3 pixels per object for the model to be able to detect the subject. So of course, I don't know, Ken, if you have in mind the size of the sluices, but they're quite large, or like maybe, I don't know, 3-5 meter. I don't know.
Well, Daniel's seen them, but yeah, I think maybe 3 meters to 5 meters long, but
yeah,
it depends if they're in these clusters. They can be, that can extend the overall size.
So, well, thanks. Sorry, I put you on the spot with the question on the size of the sluices. So it means that we're 30 centimeter. We're on the safe side. We probably, if a sluice is like 5 meter, you can get away with probably 1 meter resolution. But Sentinel-2, of course, won't do the job. Sentinel-2 is mostly used for land cover, land use changes that are happening at scale. So basically, every object that is bigger than 30 by 30 meter would be able to be detected by Sentinel-2. But so it's just about like matching the size of the object with the resolution.
Great. We do have a lot more questions. Let's move on to the next one. Patrick's asking that we've seen sluices, we've seen pits, restored areas, but what other types of ASM characterization models have been developed? How can the system approach underground mining or tailings, camp, etc.?
So I will I will give it a go, Ken, and then I will let you answer that. So at the end, it's about like identifying the right proxies that will give like strong and solid sign of ASM activities. So I'm not an expert in those proxies, but yeah, mentioning tailing camps or even detecting fires or a sign of camp or settlements. This can be done with the same concept that I mentioned before. Those proxies needs to or the proxies that you want to detect that will give you early sign or that will give you some certainties about the presence of ASM activities need to match with the right resolution.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that there's certainly other features that can be detected, and we maybe even we can show the slide on the deck of the well, yeah, here's one. So another example that we kind of looked at, we didn't run it fully, but it's these large dredges that are found in Madagascar on the Mananjari River system, which are much larger, like the size of a few houses, which and they move around. So this is an obvious application, but we also let's skip Madre de Dios for a second. Go to the Kenya example. In Kenya, Western Kenya, in the same sort of area where we looked at the River Yala, there's a lot of cyanidization pits that are being built, and they have a characteristic structure, characteristic pattern of circular tanks. On the previous slide, I think there's a photo. These kind of features, these are springing up all over mining areas in Western Kenya. Definitely, I think regulators really don't always know where they are. So this is another type of feature. Some things like underground mining or pits, or maybe activities taking place in dense vegetation would be more difficult, of course. And yeah, you can't see everything from the air. I think probably anyone who's worked in the sector knows that there's always a need for some field-based ground truthing to really understand what's going on at a site.
A question for yourself, Ken, from Pierre is, where do these ML models typically fit into either yours or UNEP's workflow?
Yeah, so I would say, this is in terms of my work on this issue, they haven't yet been a part of my workflow. And I mean, in general, UNEP and UN organizations, they can be not always at the forefront of technology. It's an honest assessment, this is something actually that UNEP is working hard to change with their digital transformation strategy. And the other thing is we don't do a lot of this analysis directly. We build capacity among our partners to do that. So for example, we work with ministries of the environment or ministries of mining or regional regulatory bodies and help them create the type of tools that they need for their particular situation. So maybe they're interested in these cyanidization pits and how they can detect and monitor them. Then we would help them, find a solution which might involve a machine learning model. But as I said, I mean, this is something that the technology is moving fast. The sector is so huge, and these tools we do want to integrate them much more into our workflow and also in the capacity building that we do to our countries.
Great, thank you. We do have just a couple more questions. One from Credo is, how do you achieve results such as the ones we've seen in regions that might have high cloud cover, such as the DRC?
Well, the answer is simple. We don't. As soon as you're working with optical imagery, you're kind of always relying on having a nice cloud-free image. So no, that's a general limitation when it comes to optical imagery. You're always kind of, relying on, having, again, as I was saying, cloud-free image. Of course, one answer could be SAR, so radar imagery. But then this comes with different challenges. I would say that the first one is being able to visually interpret what you're seeing on the radar image, because you have a lot of reflection, noise. But typically, I mean, like Picterra is also working on SAR imagery, but the use case are slightly different.
Okay, and perhaps another more technical one from Bruno. Is there a minimum recommended GSD needed to have a good sluice detector?
No, as I was saying, it's really, it's really depending on the size of the object and the resolution. So as I was saying before, keep in mind that a model, so not only for Picterra, but a model will need to see at least 3 pixels per object to be able to detect the subject. So that's so if you want to detect small screws, you will need a millimeter resolution or GSD image. If you want to look for deforestation pattern, you can go along with Sentinel-2.
Great, and I think this question from Pierre, a follow-up question, was already answered during the presentation, but we're actually going to go through this again. But his question was around, are these ML models presets that are available to anyone, or do you have to build your own models?
No, you have to build your own models. Because again, this is really a conviction that we built up over the last couple of years, that those pre-trained models, they rarely work, meaning that they rarely match your needs. I don't know if you've seen what happened with Ukraine. They use models that have been trained in the US after like Katrina, and those models, they failed in detecting damaged buildings because, a model was trained on buildings and geographical context from North America. And so that's why, like, these pre-trained model things, we do not believe in it. And that's why we've built this capability where our users can, train customized model in 15 minutes. Having said that, the reason why you can build high-performing model on Picterra is that we are training 24/7 the model. And this is what really makes Picterra unique, is that the model, so whatever the users are training on, Sluices, Pit, whatever, they're all training the same model, or at least the first same layers of the model. And meaning that the model that we have, I've seen more than 30 terabytes of training data, high quality training data since 2016. So that's why at the end, the training is so fast. So like 10 minutes of training versus probably weeks compared to other solution. So you're not starting from scratch, but we ask you and we encourage you to train your own model and to customize your own model.
So I think we have time for just the final question, and that's from Itai. So his question is, in the ASM sector, who are the main users for this type of technology? Is it just government or beyond?
I can take that. I think that probably in the ASM sector, the main use of this type of work is in academic research. To be honest, we want to bring it to governments. Certainly, governments use remote sensing and do monitoring of ASM. You know, sometimes in connection with illegal mining. There might also be governments who are doing this type of work that I'm not aware of, but I do think that one of our goals is to be able to bring the right kind of tools, and you know, they might include machine learning models, but also maybe just, you know, simpler access to imagery and visual analysis or land cover classification. We want to bring those tools closer to the stakeholders that need them. So, you know, the national governments is important. Also, equally important in many countries are the regional regulatory bodies or the regional mining centers who are going to want to get a good view of the mining in their particular jurisdiction. And I think, I mean, ultimately, there's a possibility that even you know, mining communities or people who support individual mining communities can also use eventually use these type of technologies to help improve their practices, and even, you know, help in things like exploration. We didn't talk about exploration, but this is a big need for artisanal and small scale miners is exploration data. And so I think there are applications in that. So yeah, we want to make this technology, if it's in the case when it's appropriate, more accessible to all levels.
I mean, I will just add a few words on what you just said, Ken, because behind Picta, we had this vision of making basically ML and remote sensing and all of this new technology accessible to everyone, regardless of their technical background or their background. So my hope and my dream is that this type of technology will be soon available to anyone, including local communities, local government, but also institutional stakeholder as well. That's really important that at the end, machine learning algorithms are not trained by the same type of people or the same group of people. You remember that I mentioned that when it comes to ML, diversity is key. And it's, for me, that's the biggest challenge as a society that we're facing, and not only on geospatial data, but when it comes to AI, who is training like the algorithm that will have a strong impact on our life. So that's a bit my, you know, our mission as well, to make it accessible. So at the end, we are all collectively training algorithms that are reflecting the diversity of the planet.
Great. There are no more questions. Thank you, everyone, for sending those through.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you, Ken, and to have you, everyone here.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise. It was a great opportunity. I'm grateful and very happy, grateful for all the questions and the audience as well.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.